The Unrelating podcasts are meant to be for education and entertainment. They don't constitute a service or advice. For personal struggles, please reach out to a medical or mental health professional.
So we have a really cool episode, Michelle. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
We are going to speak with one of our previous guests. It's a follow-up to his episode. This guest we're going to have on, is going to talk about how he actually met somebody now, and she's going to join us.
I love everything about this. I'm very excited, not just because we get to speak to this person again after all this time, but because they're in a place in their life that is just something to celebrate.
Michelle, how did you meet your husband?
Through a mutual friend, which is, to me, a great way to meet someone.
Interesting, because I think today's guest, it's the same situation. They met through mutual friends.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to hear their story, but also the fact that now they're together. It's kind of a new relationship. I'm just going to be curious how they're navigating that, because the kind of the first year of a relationship is kind of, I don't want to say it's make or break, but there's so many like positives to it. And then there's also some pitfalls. And I want to know how they're figuring it all out as they go.
Welcome to Unrelating with Kel and Michelle, and I'm one of your hosts, Kelly. With me is my co-host, Michelle, a licensed marriage and family therapist who's been providing individual and couples therapy for over a decade. Together, we'll explore how we engage in relationships, why we do what we do, and what causes people to unrelate. Well, joining us today, rejoining us, our returning champion from a previous episode is Matt from Michigan. Matt, how are you?
You're wonderful.
Thanks for coming back to the podcast. It's great to see you.
Yeah, same here.
And with Matt is Andrea, who is Matt's new, can we say girlfriend? Is that okay to say?
Yes. Yep. Correct.
It's official.
It is official.
Okay. I know. That's one of the things I want to talk to you guys about is labels. And when did that become official?
So on Matt, your previous episode when you were on Unrelating, we talked to you about going through a very difficult divorce and how you were struggling with, jumping back in the pool, right?
Yep.
The dating pool, which many people can relate to, by the way, getting back into the dating world. I certainly could years ago. So I think in many ways, I think it was really helpful to hear your perspective on that. So fast forward, you did jump in the pool and now you've met somebody wonderful. So talk about how you two met.
Well, obviously, we were never really actively looking for each other, I guess, but it was a friend of a friend that I was over at their parents' house, and it was her parents' friend as well. So we ended up meeting through, again, friends of friends in that route. So
Kind of unexpectedly at a pool.
exactly. Yep.
I know. I love that.
Well, we thought it was kind of interesting. The
Yeah.
person that was labeled jumping back in the
It's
pool.
Yeah, very fitting.
Yes.
And then, okay, so Matt, so what was your pickup line? What was the first interaction like?
It's a very interesting pickup line, to say the least. So Andrea here worked for one of our internet companies that services our internet and stuff. So we had an incident where the power line got pulled down from a going by a tractor. It pulled everything down. So I had to show her what happened. And she basically explained that, what happened and all this stuff. And from right there, it was just a connection. I'm like, I'm talking to this girl, which was supposed to be like a 5-minute conversation, ended up being like I don't know how long do you say it was? It was probably
like 45 minutes,
yes.
I think. Yeah.
So I'm like, why am I still talking to her? This is still like a great connection that we had over an internet line that fell down to my backyard. So that was our first introduction to each other.
Nice. Well, it must have worked.
It did.
Andrea, what was your situation at the time? What was your background, your relationship background?
Yeah, so I've been divorced for about 5 years now. So I have a 5-year-old son. And it was kind of like, I would say, like open to a relationship, but not really like, it wasn't at the forefront of my goals at that point. So I was kind of becoming more open, but not. My brother, just to put it in perspective, he's like, Andrea, you need to get back out there, start getting on dating sites, do this, that. And I was just like, no, I don't have to. Actually, I think I've kind of just been enjoying like getting to know myself post divorce. And part of me kind of wonders, like, maybe I married the wrong person because I didn't know myself as much as I thought I did. And so just kind of, that's kind of where I was at. And then when I met Matt that day, like he had kind of pulled me to the side to be like, oh, there's my house. Cause it was like right down the street. So, but then we were kind of sequestered like away from all the other people at the pool. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm talking to a guy. Like he's talking to me, but we hit it off so well. And he was just so like himself, that it made me feel at ease. And that was kind of the first time I was like, oh, like I kind of hope he like reaches out to me. And yeah.
And I want to go back to what you said, because I think it's bears repeating. It's possible you were with the wrong person because you didn't know yourself well enough.
Yeah.
That's very deep and insightful. So I didn't want to just pass by that. The other thing is, when Matt was on the show and talking about getting back out there, it was a lot about, fear and trust and, will the next person hurt me as well, and things like that. Could you relate to that as well?
Oh, absolutely. I think, kind of leading up to this podcast, I've just been thinking about, a lot of that stuff, like how fear plays a role in that. And I think going back to like not knowing myself is like, I think I believed a lot of lies, like going into my first marriage of like not being good enough or not being worthy of love. So it's like you allow someone else to kind of treat you less than what you're worth, I guess. So that was kind of a fear, like going into dating again, is like, am I going to fall into that same trap? Am I just going to be what I think the other person wants me to be? But I think that's kind of been the thing that's been really different with Matt, is like, I'm allowed to be myself. I'm allowed to like have emotions, and like, he's not afraid of that. And so I think some of the fears as they come up, he's like proving that I don't have to be afraid. And that's like been a really beautiful thing that's kind of like opened me up to like trust him more, and kind of move away from like just being fear-based. It's like, I can take that risk again because he is allowing me to like take that risk in a safe environment. So.
Yeah. And the sooner you're yourself, the better it is for the relationship. It's not good if someone's like the best version of themselves for a year and then starts showing kind of who they are.
The warning signs, right?
Yeah. Let's keep all the red flags tucked away.
Right.
Well, Michelle, they hit on something I think it's really important, and you can speak to this, but like there is that the trust issue, because I'm also the product of divorce. I was divorced before, so and it took me a long time to get back in the pool, so to speak, or jump back in the pool. So it really comes down to trust and meeting that person who you can trust, and certainly for me, I did eventually meet somebody that I. That really won my trust and love. And it sounds like that's what, Andrea and Matt both were struggling with, obviously, is how do you then trust the next person? Right.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this with Matt a little bit earlier, is the idea that, if you go in being scared of being hurt, then everything you do is kind of in response to that fear rather than authentic or in the moment with the person. Or if you have baggage from your relationships and you're bringing it into your next one and saying, well, I'm going to assume this person's going to be the same way or treat me the same way. So trying to think ahead and say, okay, if I am hurt in some way, I'll survive it. I'm going to get through that. So kind of lowering the stakes for yourself.
I will say in my situation, like the time, I've had over 10 years of, time to heal. They always say time heals, that was one of my things too. Like, with Andrea, she's, pretty new to it in my mind. 5 years is not that long, in my sense, but
felt long, but yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like time, that's what I'm allowing for this time around, is like time to get to know him, time to just kind of rest and not like feel rushed or pressured to like, oh, I've got to get married or hit this, XYZ before this time in my life. It's like, we are what we are, we're parents with children. And so there's kind of things that dictate our life routine right now. And like, that kind of allows for that, just like stability. And then we're like meeting each other in that. So it's time. And then like proof by action. I think in my first marriage, a lot of it was like, oh, what he's saying. And now what I realized, and like through counseling, my counselor used to tell me, like, don't listen to what they're saying, look at what they're doing. And I think Matt has like proven so many times, he just shows up like in the like small ways, but just amazing ways.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, he's here. Like he's present.
It's the little things that make it known, I guess.
So, yeah.
That is true. Action speaks so much louder than words. It's so true. You're right. Don't say it, do it. Right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So you guys meet, you meet at the pool party. Matt, how long before you asked her out, or what was that like?
Well, this was the interesting part, and it was such a good story. And so me being a guy, you don't want to look too eager to, text her that night and stuff. And so this was on a Saturday we first met. Fast forward it to Sunday. We both were invited over the same pool again to just hang out and stuff. I grilled food for everybody, made a good meal going on and stuff. And Andrea, I think that's when she gave the okay to my neighbor that said, give him my number. It's okay for him to text me. Well, me being the not eager part, you don't want to look too eager, right? You say. I ended up waiting till I think Tuesday.
Yes.
How do you say?
Yeah, I was about to yell at you, but
you're too cool for school.
Yeah, exactly. So this is all calculated on my end, but come to find out, she was waiting for me to text her either that night or the next day, and I think I don't know if you were ready to give up on me or not at that point, but or kind of.
I think what I was going through was like I had let my guard down, and so I was actually really excited about him. And so Sunday came and went, and then Monday, and I was like, I'm fine. Like, I'm totally fine. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm not fine. Like, I just opened this part of me that I was trying to keep closed. And it, like, I didn't have a choice in it. Like, it just opened up in my heart. And I'm like, this is actually something I really desire. And so I think I was kind of going through my own, like, healing in a sense of like, oh, I'm taking a risk. I'm, stepping out. And so I was like, okay, like just give him time. Like maybe he needs time. So I think Tuesday came along, and on my lunch break, I was like, I'm just going to stop by the church, and I'm just going to like place it in God's hands. Like, I'm just going to go say a little prayer, like say a prayer for him, whatever he's going through. And then I left the church.
I felt the poke in the back of my
I then kicked him very hard.
And literally like 10 minutes later, I get a text from him like, hey, it's Matt. And I was like, oh my gosh. I don't know. It just felt like an answer to prayer. So that was pretty cool.
Quick PSA for those men out there. I would like to disabuse you of the notion that you can ever appear too eager. In the sense, like if you're vibing with someone, they do want to hear that you're vibing with them sooner rather than later. So.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, it's been a lot of years since I dated, so
Yeah, it's tough, Matt. I can relate. It's tough, man. Like when you pull that trigger, because you want to pull the trigger, you want to ask him out, but you're like, oh no, I don't want to look like a little eager kid, So you want to be cool.
I think Kelly spent a year just staring at his wife and then before he asked her out.
Well, yeah, we were friends. We were friends before we were ever dating for like a year. Yeah, so I did wait a while. You're right, Michelle. But okay, so that's very interesting. It took 3 or 4 days, Matt, and then you ask her, you text her, hey, let's grab dinner, right?
Yeah, we talked for a while, like texting back and forth and stuff, just kind of getting to know each other, interest, basically like everyday questions, what are your interests, just small talk, and I think we only talked a little bit at first, it was just maybe for like 20 minutes, half hour, and then. Obviously, we had kids and stuff too. So we're like, well, all right, well, can I talk to you tomorrow again? And, it was that little small talk first, and then which kind of led to longer conversations. And then finally we say, hey, maybe we should go out and grab a drink or something like that, or, hang out a little bit. So we set a date. I think it was a week or two later from the day we set. All the emotions are stirring, you're nervous, you're excited, you know them all, right? And it was like 2 days before, and I became like sick as a dog, just, the flu symptoms and all that stuff. And I go, Andrea, I don't want to, give you the bad news, but I am not feeling good. And I don't want to try to go out feeling like this and just be a miserable time for us both. So, yeah, we ended up actually waiting another couple weeks after that even. So it was like a month before we actually met on our first date.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. A month. That's pretty long.
I hear you.
But you were talking the whole time.
What?
You guys were talking the whole time though, and you were like building intimacy and getting to know each other.
Yep.
I like that you did it by phone too, because text is good, but not like when you don't know someone, text could go wrong really quickly, because
the problem
with
with text is the emotion. Yeah. Like you don't know somebody's, like they say, if they're mad, you can't tell through text unless they got the emojis behind it. Sometimes if is that the new saying now? You got to have an emoji behind every sentence now, so if they're happy,
so that people can interpret it correctly.
Yep.
Yeah, I have a huge suggestion for people: do not have discussions over text that are tense, or don't fight over text.
So with my marriage, like I had a long distance relationship with my ex, so I didn't want to spend too much time texting because you don't really see who the person is. Like for me, like discernment is like seeing you with other people or seeing you out in public and like having that one-on-one interaction, because you can think you're really vibing with someone through text and then you're like with each other and the conversation doesn't go, or I don't know. There's only so much you can tell through text message. So,
and discernment, that's a good point. Like meeting each other's friends, which, you guys have similar circles, so that wasn't as complicated, but yeah, you can tell a lot about a person by their friends. And I have to say, the body language, I'm loving it.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. The lean-ins. Remember this, Michelle? This is the early parts of a relationship.
No, it's been so long.
This is what it looks like right here.
Yeah.
Yep. They're in for it.
Fast forward 20 years. No, I'm just kidding. I have a question, actually. You both have kids. Andrea, how long were you married prior?
For a year. Start to finish.
Oh, for a year?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. And Matt, remind me again, how long were you married?
It was about 7 years, and then we were separated for about 3 or 4 years, and then divorced after 7, I think it was.
Okay. Yeah. So kind of shorter marriages. So, which is good, but you have kids. How does that work to people who both have children? When do you introduce the kids together, and what does that look like?
I think mine was a few months into it, I think. Actually, I think I mentioned my kids are 17 and 13, so they're a little bit older, I guess. So they were asking me questions like, Dad, where are you going tonight? Those questions to where, and the last thing I want to do is lie to my kids, because that's not what we're here to do. So no, I told them I actually had a date. So that was, obviously we were talking, like I said, about a month before that. So I didn't tell them about that part. So that was kind of on the secret side, I guess, before we mentioned to them. And then, after we had the first date is when I told my kids that, hey, I got a date tonight. So how about you?
Yeah. So I think I want to keep that separate at first, just because I remember like when I was younger and my parents got divorced. So it's like when my mom dated someone, I would get very attached to them, and then all of a sudden they were gone. So it was like, I didn't want to create that kind of feel for Barrett where you introduce them too soon, they get attached, and then it's like people constantly coming and going. Yeah. So yeah, I think we did the first few months, just dates between us two. And then I think it kind of becomes clear at some point, like if I do see this person, and I did see him like being a part of my future, more than like 2 months. So I was like, okay, I think it's time to introduce my son, because, that's a large part of my discernment too, is like, is this person going to be good for my child? Because if not, like, they're not, like, I'm not going to put in time dating someone that isn't going to be like a good father figure. So,
yeah. That's got to be a huge consideration for single parents when you think about it, when they have kids, and then they don't want to, you want to protect your kids, and you don't want to introduce somebody that, that you don't trust. Again, go back to trusting them. So that's I can imagine it's a big hurdle for a lot of single parents.
Mm-hmm. Then the world starts creeping in. You make the decision to like kind of meet each other's kids. Also, Andrea, you mentioned your brother saying, get back out there. Matt, I think you mentioned your family was eager for you to maybe meet someone new. So then you start kind of expanding the bubble. What was it like for you guys when, the whole town is now invested in a relationship?
we're both from a smaller town area, and I would walk into our local coffee shop, and I think the one time I had 3 people ask me, from the time I went in and got a coffee, the time I walked out, I had 3 people ask me about our relationship already. So that's how our news flies in our area. I'm sure you had similar experiences with that too.
Yep. Yeah. I think being from a small town, everyone's looking out for you. So they're kind of rooting for you. And then when they see you together, they're like, wait, you and so-and-so, you know, so
it's a good thing.
It is,
you know, it can be annoying, but it's also a good thing. They're actually rooting for you, like you said, and it's a good feeling.
Didn't John Cougar Mellencamp sing about that in Small Town? Wasn't that part of the? No, I'm just joking.
It may be.
Am I dating?
It feels like he got a lot right with in that song about small towns.
Now that you've been together 6 months, has there been any type of conflict or any type of disagreement? Have you guys had any issues where? I don't want it to sound like I'm expecting that, but I'm just wondering: has there been any situation? I don't know. Has there been anything that's come up?
Yeah, we had a New Year's Eve. I think that's probably one of the only ones that we've really had was. So we had an issue where we were going to get together for New Year's Eve, and then at her brother's and stuff, and my son wanted to stay with me that night, so it kind of ruined our plans a little bit, and it was one of those things where we planned on being together for New Year's Eve and all that good fun, and it didn't work out that way. Well, we were getting together the next morning too to go see some of her family, and it was kind of like a moment of openness, I guess. I think
there was like tension.
Yes,
but then we talked about it, and it was like, again, another one of those things where I was like, oh, like I can really trust this person, because it wasn't. We were able to kind of like air the thing that was like,
the tension, I guess,
bothering us and like work through it. So essentially, like the next morning, I was ready to go visit family, and like he still had his son. He's like, oh, I got to go back home and like bring him back out to this, where his mom is. So he had to, when he got here, I felt bad. He's like, oh, I sped here the whole way. I'm like, don't die. It'll be okay.
But one thing we did find out is, we can work through some of the difficulties, and we understand we got maybe more challenges than like the, the couple that had no kids, and they get married type thing. But, we both have kids going into this. So we knew there's going to be challenges ahead of us to, there's going to be hurdles. And
navigate those things.
Yeah. And we both said up front is, our kids come first. We will do the best we can do to have our relationship work equally in that same eyes. And, but ultimately, the kids come first, and we got to take care of them as well. So that was.
And was that a conversation you were able to have before you went to see the family?
Yes.
Yeah, we had an hour and a half drive, so we had plenty of time to talk through it. And
a lot of couples who have tension, you just kind of like passive aggressively, act out that tension the whole day, and then come back and have the conversation. And
we'll never have it at all.
Saved yourself, or never have it at all. So it's nice that you intervened sooner for yourselves.
Michelle, isn't it good though to have early on have like these little tests, because I feel like that's going to actually set them up for success in the future because they're able to communicate. It sounds like they figured it out and they communicated.
Yeah, you want to not only do you want to disagree, in early on, because you're showing who you are and you're letting the other person know who you are if you're disagreeing about something. But exactly, Kelly and I have talked about conflict styles. What are you? Someone who yells? Are you someone who isolates when you're upset? Those are important things to learn about each other, and also to just say how you're feeling. Communicating more than you normally would in the beginning is important, because again, you don't know the other person. You don't want to get in a situation where you're guessing what the other person is thinking or feeling. So it's kind of being accountable to saying how you feel, and then also being open to the other person maybe not agreeing with you and seeing if you can talk it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like that situation, it was like, oh, we can communicate, we can talk about the difficult thing and like challenge each other in different areas. And like what we came to was like, oh, I realized like I didn't communicate what the plan really was. So I'm used to be on my own, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. I have this plan in my head, but if I'm not saying that out loud,
right.
you know.
Yeah, us guys, we can't guess. We need a lot of.
Neither can women, though. I feel like guys
true.
get that.
We typically guess wrong, so.
Matt, we're always going to be wrong. Come on.
Going out with the guys or going for Valentine's Day? Which one is it? I know.
Next week. No.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get on my soapbox because I do this very often, but we are raising men to not like know how to say how they feel or to be scared of saying how they feel. And so then when they're adults and they struggle with that in a relationship, we're like, oh, how could you be that way? But it's like, because that's how we told you to be.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will say that in my first marriage, we never really had that, the back and forth conversation. If something's bothering you, it was just you're the man of the house, so you can't really say nothing about it. You just eat it and go on your day. And, now I feel like I'm more able to tell her what's bothering me instead of just festering inside and maybe waiting for like days, weeks, or months, depending on what's at hand. And I think that
explode.
That can be dangerous. Yes.
Yeah. But you guys are also figuring out like what are your deal break. Well, you should know what your deal breakers are. Hopefully you've put some time to reflect on that. But figuring out in the relationship, like what is something like I need to have changed and what is just kind of something that's irritating to me that I'll be able to live with. Well, okay, so you're going with the flow, which is great. But 6 months in, have you also been intentional in talking to each other about kind of the big stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So we're both Catholic. So she's gotten her annulment. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Catholic faith at all, but they require annulment to get remarried through the church. So Andrea has gotten hers already. I am currently going through mine right now, but that was my first step too, as far as knowing this is serious, to where I'm actually wanting to go through it and try to get the next step. So it's yes, the conversation is there.
Yeah, we definitely talked about there definitely is like potential for the future, and like I think right now that the annulment is kind of the next step to kind of open that door.
Well, you mentioned faith, and I think that's an important part of, any relationship. Doesn't necessarily need to be a religious faith, but what part did faith play? Because I know, Andrea, you mentioned you prayed that he would, that Matt would reach out to you.
Please.
How does how does faith play a role in your relationship now?
Yeah, I think for me, it's huge. Faith has always been like a big part of who I am. So having someone that I can share that with, like it's so foundational for me that, yeah, I think it's just like a great place to build off of there. So meeting someone who kind of understands their traditions, just prayers, just a lot of stuff.
The like-mindedness.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it is. And then,
morals, all that kind of stuff.
The moral code and stuff that they follow, and it just, having the same, be on the same page with everything. It's kind of the... Yeah.
We have similar life philosophies, I think, with the faith background. So that kind of helps. It's a great thing to build off of. And I think in relationships, like a lot of people often think like it's just about you, but it's actually about you and community. And like, I don't know how people make it through relationships without some sort of faith background, just because there's so much distraction and like so many things that can like try to tear you apart, that I think it kind of helps unite even when there's difficulty. Together.
Yeah. I mean, I think faith can look like many different things. It's certainly important, especially when you've been through divorce, and you need to hold on to something, because you may not have that faith you once had in love or in.
What was the song, Michelle? By Poison?
Gives
me something to believe in.
Oh my gosh.
Nerd. It's not a good show unless we mention some hair metal or something. But no, I think all of you are saying the same thing, which is, faith is the anchor that keeps you grounded to who you are and what you want and what you believe in, what your values are. It's kind of that beacon.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
You aren't letting what happened in the past affect you anymore. Like you're not angry anymore. You're fine. You've just reached a point of acceptance, and you're just like,
Yeah.
you're at peace, right? And ultimately you feel better about it.
And one of the biggest words that stick in my mind is when I had therapy going through my divorce. My therapist said, the only thing you can control is yourself and not anyone else. From that moment forward, I think that was like a realization, like, you can't control what that person does. The only thing you can do is control how you act to them, react. And that was just a powerful thing for me, to like knowing that it's not you, it's them. Now, if you react in negative ways, guess what? That can make a negative, reaction on their end too, and maybe make your life a little bit miserable too. So, yeah, that's kind of where my piece comes in, with Andrea's talking about too. And if I start acting, mean to my ex, that's going to bring back negative, feedback on my end, and
your kids
and my kids, yes.
Yeah.
And both of us, for that matter.
And I can boldly say that if you were hanging on to a lot of anger from the past, it would manifest in your new relationship. It's incredibly hard to compartmentalize.
And again, it goes, Michelle, back to the song "Don't Look Back in Anger" by Oasis.
Look at you. You're like,
My husband was just playing that on the guitar.
Casey Kasem over here, Adrian, do you remember Casey Kasem? Is there an age difference, or is there a big age difference?
Yeah, 44. It's about a little over 7 years.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
37.
Mm-hmm.
That's me and my wife, 7 years. Yeah, okay. Nice. Good job, Matt.
Thanks.
You did it.
I did it.
You kind of hit the dating lottery here so far. What advice would you give others for like what you've experienced up until this point? I mean, I know, Matt, again, we talked about your struggles getting back in the dating world, but like, how did you overcome that?
I mean, for me, like, I think it's just not to, again, like we touched on earlier, like to figure out your values, what you want in your own life. You got to figure yourself out first before you can move on to another person. I think we touched that on the first podcast of, you got to figure yourself out before you can even, bring someone else into your relationship, because that's a big red flag in my mind. If you can't love yourself, who can you love, type thing. And that's probably one of the biggest things that my biggest hurdle is, to get myself trusting myself, I guess, was kind of the big thing for me.
Yeah. And I think for me, it would be like, learn about yourself, know yourself. I think when you know yourself, you can be more of a gift for other people, and for that special someone. I think a lot of us live a life that's like very like self-centered. But I think to truly be in a relationship, you have to be for the other person.
Yep.
You have to die to yourself a lot. And I think that's where faith comes in, at least in my background of like, it's not always about you, it's about the common good. It's about us together, and like how this person is dealing with things and experiencing life and experiencing pain. And so like knowing yourself makes you more able to be a gift to other people. And I think that's ultimately what you want.
Yeah. Yep.
And I don't know, from my experience, like other people can't really fulfill like that deepest part of you. So a lot of times we're looking for this other person to fulfill something that they literally can't fulfill. So it's like, you want someone who can journey with you, who's on the same journey maybe, as opposed to like, oh, you are the person that's going to like make me complete. It's like, no, we can help each other get to the finish line, which is a different nuance, I think, than like what a lot of what our culture kind of puts forward for like relationships. So
it's the journey, not the destination, right?
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think I can relate to that. I've been fortunate to find a partner that I find a life partner who the journey is the best part for us, for me. And we just love being together and taking this life journey together. I feel really lucky to have her. If you can have that, if you can find that, that's worth living for, I think.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
It makes it all worth it. all the pain, right?
Yep.
You guys went through.
Yeah, some of that pain does build character for the future. So it's, some of the lessons that you learned in the past, are just stronger points for you in the future to kind of go forward.
But I mean, clearly you guys have done a lot of self-reflection. So you
Mm-hmm.
have a sense of what may have gone wrong or why that past relationship didn't work. And
Mm-hmm.
there's like really tangible reasons for that, but there's also, some complicated reasons for why people get divorced. So I'm just curious, you know yourselves better. You know what works better in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
How intentional are you being about bringing those healthy pieces into this relationship? Like, how are you letting each other know what your needs are in healthy ways? What do those conversations look like?
I mean, just like I said, communication is key. If there's something that is, bothering you, or there's something that you need, or, that's kind of how we've always just talked, I guess. I mean, I'm not sure how else to
I have
explain
a
it.
story that we should share.
Okay.
Because Matt showed up to pick me up for a date one night, and before he got here, I like pulled out my guitar and I'm singing, and then like all of a sudden I just start crying because it I don't, again, like something like opened in my heart, and it was like I'm really emotional right now. So he comes in, he's like, "Was I that late?" I'm like, "No, I'm not crying. I'm not crying about you." Like I think he thought I had upset him, so it was kind of funny. But then like we were talking about it afterwards, he's like, "Well, maybe like the fact that like you had this emotional response is like you were keeping it all inside." And so those are kind of our conversations of
Yep.
like, share before it gets to that point
Yep.
where you have that like,
explosion.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we've been saying. Like if there's something bothering you, bring it out. Even if it's not bothering you, just, hey, this is what happened today at work, or, with, our sons, or, whatever, just a conversation might just, make you in a better mood. And next thing you know, you're back to where you were, being the day or whatever. So.
Yeah, but even like for good times. So say it's not even an issue. It's just something that you prefer in your relationship. Are you guys vocal? You say, you know what, I'm someone who loves hugs, so more hugs the better. I'm someone who doesn't like this, so do less of this.
Yeah, we're pretty huggable. How's that?
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Well, because I asked
because when he drives in my driveway, he'll like turn the wheel all the way. I'm like, can you like make it so it's straight? So yeah, we have been pretty good about just
you have your little
to be upfront about it, but yeah.
Because sometimes I'll have couples who really don't think to communicate those little things, and so I'll ask them something like, Andrea, tell Matt something you would like him to do more of in the relationship.
Now, we haven't had the snoring. I do have a snoring issue, but seeing how we're not living together, that's
we might be calling you up like in a year from now.
Right. The next question is,
after marriage,
Matt,
and then
tell Andrea something you want her to do less of. Yeah. These are the sort of things that feel kind of artificial. You're in a new relationship and you're like, I don't want to, hand you a list of my needs and be like, do all of this and don't do all of this. But it's good in the moment if you do notice them doing something that you like to say, oh, I like that. Keep doing that. And not just in a sex way. Although the sex talk is important. I should point that out. I heard myself. I'm like, that sounds, not, I'm not saying sexy talk, but the sex talk, which is, logistically talking about STIs or STI testing, or, what your likes are, what your preferences are in the bedroom. I mean, that's important too, to communicate, if we're going to talk about communication being important.
That's probably the hardest thing to communicate, right, Michelle?
I mean, it can be, but it depends if you feel comfortable with each other. And again, if you can do it in like a positive reinforcement kind of way, where if something is happening that you like, you can point that out and say, I like that. And if there's something that is a deal breaker in the bedroom or you don't like it, to make sure that the person knows that ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's hard to share that stuff too, because like it's someone could feel rejected if you're like, no, don't do this or that. And so it's like, you have to have that trust though, that you're with someone who's like, you can listen and also like respond and like. give and receive. So.
Yeah, that's why I said, like, it's, you almost want to build a relationship more on the trust aspect of things, and then everything else just kind of follows suit. It's
easier.
It's not sex first and then, the relationship second type thing. And a lot of people do it that way, but it's not. I almost say you got to be be in the trust factor first before you can do any of that other stuff. So,
yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot, Kel, about friendship being the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Michelle, you mentioned needs. Needs evolve too, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I can think of situations where I've been married 11 years now, and needs change, mm-hmm. right? And that's something, I guess, to think about, because I'm sure with every couple, 10 years from now, my needs will change again, because we change as people. We change throughout the years too.
We do. And like I said, we're, as the older we get and stuff, even with our kids and stuff, at some point my kids might be off to college, same with hers too. It's, eventually you get to a point of, all right, now what are we going to do? We're not married yet, obviously, but there's all those questions to be asked down the road. What are we going to do once, the empty nesters, I guess you'd say. And then,
well, it's good to focus on kids, but also we still have to focus on us too, because Correct. At the end of the day, they're going to go and have their lives. But, if we don't focus on growing what we have too, then, there's nothing there. Sometimes when the kids leave, you're like, who are you?
Yep.
Gotta rediscover.
Yep.
Well, and that's why you hear about empty nest syndrome. So many parents get divorced after their kids move out, right? Because all of a sudden you have these two people staring at each other going, what do we talk about? Or what do we do now? The kids aren't around. And then ultimately, that's why it's probably so important to work on that relationship first and foremost.
Well, they also say if you have kids to deliberately have conversations that aren't about your kids. Make it 50-50. And even if you can't do that, sometimes talk about something that isn't kid related, because then you keep the connection alive as a different non-parent connection alive.
Yeah.
Which is hard. Kids are sometimes all consuming. So it's what did I do today that didn't involve besides work?
It's cool to see, we haven't had couples yet who are just starting. It's really neat, I think, to see. Remember those days, Michelle?
Yeah, but what makes this distinct and puts it on a really good path is that you are feeling that you can be yourselves, that you have put some work into knowing who that person is, and that you're being intentional about getting to know each other. You're not taking this phase for granted. It's lovely, it's butterflies, it's romantic, and it's exciting. But some people just focus on only that piece and don't have conversations, don't communicate their needs. And so a year in, they find out, oh, wait, I didn't know this piece. And that's the problem.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, and like I said, we both had a, divorce, under our belt. So we have learned, I think both of us have, from that sense, how to maybe go forward a little differently the next time, instead of, just whether it was based on looks or, everybody had the reason to get married the first time and stuff, but, maybe look at some different things, just different aspects of each other. And I think that's what we're doing,
Yeah. And my marriage, it started and ended so quickly. This is, I don't know, it feels new, I've never gone through it before, because I'm I don't really think I had that good of a connection with the other person. So I don't know, I'm kind of eating it up, but also looking for the future of I want to make sure we set it up now so that, we can keep growing together and not take it for granted.
Yep. One day at a time is what I say.
Has there been a pleasant surprise you've learned about the other person that you could share? Or is there something or something maybe you just really, really love about this other person?
I think it's the openness, for me being able to just talk to her about anything.
Andrea, anything?
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things was our connection with music. He plays guitar, and so I love that, because we have a different even different more deep connection because of the music thing, and so that was really big. And I just love things like his laughter, and honestly, the biggest thing that I'm most thankful for is just like the peace that he brings me. Cause I think I'm on my own. I'm like a little bit more uptight. I'm like, and I'm a single mom and I have a 5-year-old who's constantly like breaking things or, for instance, one night there was a marble jar that was up on the cupboard and he tipped it over and it just went like, it shattered like across the whole floor. Oh. And my knee-jerk reaction is to be like, Barrett, like, and Matt looks at me and like we made eye contact. He's like, oh, that was kind of cool.
That's cool.
And then I kind of followed suit. So I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Like that's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. So I think that has been the biggest surprise for me is that like someone else could like bring calm to my storm a little bit. And like, not that you are like completing me, but you're making me a better person. Like you're making me more who I want to be.
I was going to say this, something similar to that too. Like, as far as me being a better person, like with, I struggle a little bit with drinking and stuff, alcoholism and all that stuff before that. And now it's like, I can finally do things without maybe using that, and that's all things that you can actually like, make yourself better by, I still drink once in a while, but not like I used to. So
yeah, that's not what the basis of our connection is on. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I love that because I had what some might call a love at first sight situation with my husband, but I call it serenity at first sight because what I first felt was just peace and the serenity, not a lust. It was different than that, and that has carried it through. But I love the idea of instead of chasing some high, which a lot of people do in a relationship, it's more of looking for the person who grounds you, who makes you better, who motivates you to be better, who is compassionate and empathetic with you when you don't quite live up to that.
Yep, and that's going to happen.
Yes.
I was going to mention too, because you remind me of that, Matt, but like, if I feel so bad now for young people trying to meet each other because you have these stupid apps and like, they just aren't meeting. Like I met my wife organically. You guys met naturally, it's like we all meet spouses, our spouses like normally. Right. But nowadays it seems like people aren't doing that as much.
No. And I'm not saying it can't work that way, but man, you're setting yourself up for, a lot of different things. I mean,
you're going to have to sift through a lot of junk to find the gem, I think.
How many people actually telling their faults online, say, I do this, like we're talking about snoring, and not many people talk about that or whatever. And they'll always give you their best face forward instead of some of their bad habits and, or whatever their likes are and dislikes. And
and here I go on my social media rant as always, but generations are growing up, with less social and emotional skills and high and more unrealistic expectations because they're seeing manufactured images all the time. And very much more self-centered. So all of those are like disastrous for a healthy relationship.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah.
I have a few coworkers that are on the dating apps. And so I was like, I'm not getting on them because I didn't have the energy to be like sifting through guys. But the things that they talk about is just, it's like they've only talked for a day through text message and they're getting a picture of his like private area. It's like, how did that become the norm? Like you don't do that when you meet someone on the street. You're not just like, hey, here, that's not normal. Like put that away.
Have you been to LA?
Maybe it is. I don't know. I'm from a small town, so maybe it is from other places. But
you can cut that out.
All the things that come out of it, the ghosting, the like lack of accountability when you're online.
And they'll like make a good
lack of respect.
Yeah, they'll make a good connection with someone else, and it's like all of a sudden they've deleted them from all the social media platforms. It's like it's just hard. I don't know.
We could do a whole episode, Michelle, about social media and just how it's ruining a whole generation of kids, right?
So. Just because it's a norm, they think it's a norm, more or less.
Honestly, for the health of the relationship, what I would want to know is if you guys were to start having any kind of distress or challenges that you felt you couldn't tackle alone, do you have like a plan in place or an idea of what you could do to get support?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, let's fast forward it. Let's say we get married or whatever. And there's therapy, there's different stuff. And I think we're both pretty open enough to where I don't think we'd ever let it get to that point. But
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's always things that could happen, I'm sure. But I mean,
yeah, I think for me, it's like the earlier the better. Like if you start seeing issues, you jump on it right away. You don't wait for it to manifest and fester. And yeah, I'm a big proponent of counseling. Like in my first marriage, as soon as there started being issues, I was like, I'm going to counseling because I thought it was like my issue. But then I was like, oh, like we probably need couples counseling. So I looked into like EFT, which is emotionally focused therapy, because I was in the Seattle area, and that's like very heavily, is it like the Gottman Institute and Sue Johnson's. There's a lot of big names like out there where they had like the Institute out there. I don't know. But yeah, so I think we have a lot of skills or tools, resources at our hands because we already went through that. It's like, I think I would have no problem like saying, hey, this is too big for me to handle. Let's bring some outside help in.
yeah,
and
absolutely.
You know what? I have a question because I poll all my friend couples this because my husband and I disagree on the philosophy on this one. Are you someone who thinks that like you should bring up the little stuff or only bring up the big stuff?
I think it's give and take. So my philosophy on this is to not worry about the little things as much as the bigger things. Now, if a little thing does bother you, you can bring it up and say, I just don't care for that. But I think if you love somebody, enough, the little things aren't a bother, I guess. It's part of their character, part of who they are. And that's where I think all that takes place. And like where the connection is like, you can be a Bond and, the snow rings of the world, the little, like, if you say a word a certain way or something like that, all those little things kind of go away. They become funny after a while. Like you start making fun of, hey, you snored last night, or you eat with the mouth open type thing. It becomes funny. It becomes it might be annoying, but it's kind of how to say it, a cute thing, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I think for me, it's not necessarily the small things. It's like, why? Like, what's the why behind it? Why is this little thing bothering you? Is it you're trying to mold them to be exactly what you want them to be? Or is it like it's triggering something in you? And I think that would be like the differentiation of if it's worth bringing up or whatever. But I think
like you're not trying to change somebody. You're just trying to, get to know who they are first. And then, yes, things do change down the road because of, you do kind of adapt each other a little bit. I mean, I think there's, traits that kind of rub off on you and that rub off on me too as well. And I think that's a good thing.
And once we're sharing a space too, like ask us again later.
Yeah.
Like, when we move into the same house, like
for number 3.
Yeah, right.
I'm banking on a third show with you guys. No, yeah, because I think like a trigger for me is feeling like I can't fix something I don't know is broken. So sometimes for me, it's like I'd rather you tell me like this little thing I do annoys you, and then I can fix it. It's not a big deal, and then it doesn't have to annoy you. And that feels healthy to me. But I agree that like nitpicking or every little thing, picking your battles, saying like, I don't have to point out every little thing that irritates me about you.
Right.
Yeah.
But I know that for myself, I would like to be able to say like, can you not drink milk out of the, out of the jug or something? That would be great. But that's a very small thing, but I think a little bit of that is okay to just say, can you adjust yourself in a minor way a little bit? And that becomes a joke too. But yeah.
It could be death by 1,000 cuts though, right, Michelle? If you did too much of that?
Right, exactly. So you got to pick your battles.
Yeah.
And you got to know how the other person is receiving it. Because, if Andrea says something to you, Matt, like, can you do less of this? And you say, oh, you're trying to change me or you don't love me for who I am. Like that.
I just laugh at her.
Right. Well, so I think getting on the same page with your partner, saying like, twice a year, am I allowed to say something like to ask you to not, that's something that annoys me. But yeah, but he's kind of like you where he's just like, you know what, give that person grace. It's not a big deal.
Yep.
The big things are what's important. Who cares? I'll get over it.
Yeah, I tend to deal with a lot of things through, the comedic, the comedy side of things. Even though you're sad, you're laughing type thing. Like even though like a good example was when my neighbor passed away. It was a very sorrowful moment for like when we're at the wakes and stuff, and and the family to this day keep saying it. Like I still remember when you walked in that funeral parlor, and all of a sudden you started laughing, hysterically about something, and they said it brought joy to them for whatever reason. It was just one of those things where it just kind of like lifted the room a little bit. So laughter can kind of heal a little bit in that sense. Now
it diffuses some of the tension.
Yep. You kind of take
humor is also a form of intimacy, which people don't think about.
Okay.
When you connect on a level, when you connect by laughing with each other, or you're getting to know someone in that way.
Yeah,
you feel more connected.
I feel like I'm right there with that because it's I laugh a lot. So.
Well, I think I can speak for our listeners as well as Michelle and I, but we are really rooting for the two of you. Best of luck with your relationship. It's so exciting to see.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're excited too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really appreciate you coming on and talking about it too. It's very gracious of you and brave and very open. So kudos. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Absolutely.
Well, hopefully those two don't feel too much pressure to, get married right away.
Us telling them to get married was not pressure, right?
Right. But do you think at 6 months, that's about the right time people start talking about big picture?
Maybe, in 6 months. I'd say more like when you're getting to the year anniversary mark, people start getting itchy to know more about what's in store. Also, it depends on where they're at in their lives. Like these two have already kind of gone through it. They have kids, so they're in a different place to be able to think about the future.
I just really thought it was great that, having spoken to Matt before, seeing his evolution and where he's at now, it's great to see him succeed as far as finding that his next life partner. They seemed really happy together.
They seemed very happy together, and it was like the way they looked at each other, their body language, the way they respected each other's space and what they were saying. They were actively listening to each other and feeding off of each other, all very positive cues.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you. I love that we got to follow up with Matt, and where he was before was just kind of in a different phase of his life, but he couldn't have probably imagined being here.
In your practice, Michelle, do you see folks who have been together like 6 months? Is that even a thing?
Oh, I wish. One of my favorite categories of therapy is premarital counseling. I would love people early on in their relationships to get some support, to have those conversations that feel scary or uncomfortable. I highly recommend, if you're new in a relationship and you think it's something that could go all the way, that you guys just go get a little bit of support to communicate those things and get on the same page. But I also see a lot more people who are coming to therapy because they had a horrible breakup, or, the navigating the dating world is just, a hot mess. So
yeah,
it's great to see two people find each other.
It's funny because I know we mentioned this in the conversation, but the fact that they learned a lot from their previous marriages that failed, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? And ultimately, sometimes I really believe this. It's helpful to go through those tough experiences, ultimately to come out on the other side a stronger, better person. And I think this is a good example of both Andrea and Matt having done that, and now they're in a better position to succeed because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. They also took their time, and they had a very difficult time recovering from those relationships. And rather than kind of shut themselves down, they decided to self-reflect and work on themselves. That was a big theme, I think, in the show, is that they both put effort into learning more about themselves and figuring out what they want and who they are. And so that was all caused by the pain that you're talking about. The impetus for that self-reflection was the pain.
Mm-hmm.
So look at where they were able to get to from that.
Kudos to them. These are fun episodes to talk about.
I know. I'm excited for them. They're doing so much right, and that makes me hopeful for them. And they seem to have a healthy idea of what it's going to take to thrive in their relationship, which, is the standard stuff, communication and respect and all of that. But they're not waiting to do that stuff. They're actively doing it now in the beginning. So they're setting a great foundation. And I think that's what I would want people to take away from this episode, is to put the effort into setting a good foundation, a strong set of habits in your new relationship that are going to take you further.
If you're struggling with family, friends, or coworkers, in a bad relationship and wondering what to do, or you want a relationship and to set yourself up for success, then we want to talk to you. So make your appointment on Unrelating. To be a guest, ask a question, or recommend a topic, drop us an email at theunrelatingpodcast@gmail.com. And be sure to follow us on Instagram or Facebook.